Hello, friends and adventurers. I'm M. Let's make your descriptions the most memorable thing in the whole world. Because we can, with one simple trick. Welcome to the DM table. So this one simple trick, what it is using a unique word in your description. Once, very important or not so important, but a memorable thing that you want to describe. How it's done is simply making sure that your descriptions are otherwise clean and direct and to the point and detailed enough, but not flowery, not full of all kinds of words here and there that your players may accuse you of making a word salad from. No, this is where you describe everything in good enough detail, but it's clean. And then you add one really descriptive word to the whole mix that is known to your players. You suspect that it's known. You don't use a word that's very exotic. You just use a word that's slightly or somewhat exotic, or a scent or a sound or some feeling that is just a bit exotic and maybe a bit out of place, or maybe, well, very much in place, but it's indeed standing out because it's unique, because in the whole description that one point stood out very vividly. Let me give you an example. When I played back in the day Vagrant Story, was it a Squaresoft game that, well, it's essentially Dark Souls. If you didn't know, it's something that was Dark Souls way well before Dark Souls, and it was really, really very much like it. And it had quite a unique system, but this is not what I'm gonna be talking about today. Just wanted to bring this up as a good example of use. They had, I believe, now I haven't refreshed this in a long time, 2 decades to be more specific, but they had Rue Vermilion, so Vermilion Street in the game. And this immediately reminded me of Edgar Allan Poe's story about a similar such street, or at least due to use of French in description and descriptiveness in such a, well, manner as I was describing, using the word vermilion instead of saying red or something. So this is a word that's probably known well enough by English-speaking people, so you can use it without there being a whole bunch of confusion of what you're even saying, but it will evoke something else than just saying Red Street. Red Street is already a good description, but if you go this little distance further, you will achieve great memorability. This further is then emphasized when you can reuse it and connect it. Now, whether it was in the same game or I believe it was from Yu-Gi-Oh! That I was playing at the time, but I've then seen an order of mages, I think, that were called Vermilion Sparrow. That's in singular. Vermilion Sparrows, it would be in multiple, I would say. But yes, you have a wizard called Red Sparrow, for whatever reason. Now, that really struck out at me, and I thought about it for years and years and years of what kind of cool esoteric order do they have. And I came up with something akin to pyromancy from Dark Souls, even before Dark Souls existed, because it so evoked such a feeling that you had these mystical pyromancers that are obsessively researching fire, and perhaps it was blood, perhaps it was something else, but you see, it was immediately extremely memorable. A bunch of red wizards that live in Red Street that they got the name from, or the street got the name from them. And that's only, well, sort of like a deliberate coincidence that the DMs of those games thought of at the time. And that's because all the other description was clear and methodical, and yet one piece of information was aggrandized. So that's what happened, and we've tested it now with me feeling this way about it for multiple decades. So there's your test. It's very memorable. And yet, it's not like there was anything else to it that I can recall. So, even on its own, it stands the test of time. Now, imagine if you actually get to use it with more, even freedom that Tabletop affords you as a dungeon master. Think what effect you can have. But we can also use this with a sound or a scent, as I said. Think how Silent Hill uses a sound of static of a radio to demonstrate a concept. This is a sound that your players can easily imagine, and yet it's sort of somehow mechanically out of place, and yet it's also in place, as I said earlier. It's something that's both in and out of place, and it's one element that stands out. Even though it's harmless in its own right, it sort of stands out with some sort of ominousness. And Silent Hill is extremely famous for this one sound that any place with radios could have produced anywhere else. So this is the technique that achieves that. Now make sure this is something specific enough that it's different enough, and yet players can recognize it, like that radio static that all players at the time could easily know how it would sound and what noise would it make, so that they can vividly visualize it even later. Now, of course, a video game has the option to play stuff at your face, but as a dungeon master, you want something that people can hear in their mind without you needing to describe it, that they can understand, and yet it can be at the edge of understanding, that they are not quite sure that they want to think about, which is what creates memorability, most likely, perhaps, but also something that is, as I said, so well fitted that it's iconic as well. And then you have the double whammy of thinking about it because it's all this, and feeling good about it because it's all that, as you can see. Again, just remember one word per segment. Like if you have a sentence, one word of this. And not every sentence, just the key sentence of describing the whole quarter of the town or something, like Vagrant Story did it. So keep it to central points and pieces, but not just story central points and pieces. You can use it for scenery, central point of scenery, atmosphere, and description, not necessarily of the story. Center points, you can keep them somewhat separate, but it's best when they sort of meet occasionally, but the players can't, crucially, predict when they'll meet, whether something is important because it's glorious or something is glorious but not important. They shouldn't be able to make that distinction because you want them to have fun and explore, and you want to develop their stories that they invent when they're exploring. You know, do the old expand upon what the players have said and thought. And this technique is also something D&D used quite well, if, I don't know whether accidentally or not, probably not accidentally with all the repeated successful uses. I mean, how many of us can say that we understand why is a dragon a great worm at times? Why a worm in the first place? Do we know? We kind of don't know. Do we understand the word? Not quite, but we kind of do. And so this is why that sort of thing is great, like polymorph, like phase. I mean, running into a phase spider for the first time, you're like wondering, does it have phases? Why is it called like this? Would the people of this country call it phase spider? And would they, you know, have concept of monster having phases? And then you'll learn that it's actually phasing out of reality, and that there are wizards that know about this, and there's research, and my lord, right? And yet this is all done with one simple word that just says phase, where it wasn't meant to otherwise. That all people understand, and yet nobody understands at the time. That's the technique. So this happens in D&D over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of what makes D&D iconic system in the minds of everybody. That's one of the several major traits that distinguish it from almost anything else, because it used this technique quite successfully. And so, players and DMs, adventurers, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next, and even perhaps every week. And I wish you luck on your adventures and to see you again soon. If you would like to write to me something in the comments that I would be really, really happy to reply to, I would love it, then you certainly can, and I would love to see it. Until next time, bye.